Yeah, before we actually ask you any questions, it'd be cool for you to just introduce yourself, for those of you who maybe don't know who you are.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Drew Pavlou. I'm a human rights activist in Brisbane, Australia. I'm 22 years old. Um, I sort of fell into this because I organised one protest to support Hong Kong and the Uyghurs, and I was assaulted on campus by Chinese nationalists, and hundreds of Chinese nationalists sort of descended upon us. After that happened, the Chinese Consul General in Brisbane, who was also made a professor at my university, they have very close ties with the Chinese government. Um, he endorsed the violence, saying it was patriotic. My family received all these death threats. Um, and I kept on sort of protesting. Eventually, the University of Queensland, and they have a relationship with China worth $300 million a year. They actually tried to expel me. So that became this huge sort of, saga in Australia. And I'm still here, you know, almost 2.5 years since the first punch where I got punched, still kicking. And now we're running for Parliament, and we've got a young multicultural party. We've got a young Hong Konger Australian running with us, Max Mock. He's going against Gladys Liu, a Liberal Party MP who has significant links to the Chinese Communist Party's United Front network. And we've got two great Uyghur young women running for us in South Australia, and they're the first Uyghurs to run. As far as we know, they're the first Uyghurs to run in a democratic election anywhere in the entire world. So yeah, we're trying to. We've continued to take on the Chinese Communist Party, still kicking, and became this whole. It sort of has slowly taken over my life.
Great.
Yeah.
Now, you actually told kind of what the first question was. How did this all kick off? Can you go back to the moment where all of this shit kind of hit the fan?
Yeah. So I never once tried to. I never set out to be an activist related to China whatsoever. It's sort of just. It honestly almost happened on a whim. Like, I was watching people at the University of Queensland. There's a big student group, and people were posting in the student group in the lead up to the 30th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. There were, Chinese students who were posting defenses of the massacre, what the government did. And I was watching what was happening in Hong Kong. This was 2019. Watching, these young people my age getting bashed and brutalized by Chinese police, Hong Kong police. And I had been aware of what was happening with the Uyghurs for a while at that point. I was reading about the concentration camps, and I'd studied the Rwandan genocide in school, and I'd always sort of made a pact with myself, if, genocide occurs again in my lifetime, which it will, because it's this like evil recurrence that keeps on happening. Like I wanted to make sure that I would not be one of those people who look the other way. And so with all that happening in 2019, I tried to, just on a whim almost, I organized a small protest at the University of Queensland where I was studying. And it was basically a protest against the university's ties with the Chinese government, trying to support Hong Kong, trying to support Uyghurs. And it was the first protest I'd ever organized in my life. It was really disorganized. I had like literally 10 mates who just came along with me. I slept in on the morning of the protest. I was not prepared at all. And I was like 1 hour late to my own protest. It was such a small sort of like, almost insignificant affair. And yet the night before the protest, there had been Chinese international students at UQ who were threatening to kill me if I went ahead with it and saying, "We'll kill your mother." And I couldn't accept that. I just, with my personality, with those people, when they were threatening to kill me, threatening to kill my mum if I went ahead and protested against the Chinese government in Australia, I just Googled, insults in Mandarin, and I just copied and pasted what I found on Google. So I just, these people were trying to threaten me. They were trying to say, if you go ahead with the protest, kill your mum. I just was like, fuck you, I'm going to go ahead with it anyway. I didn't even think anything would happen. I just thought, oh, just, it's online stuff. We went ahead with it, and then, everything was normal for like an hour. And as I said, it was a very small protest. We only had 10 people. It was pretty disorganized. And almost just as we were about to, end up, like 2 Chinese men came from different directions, and they, grabbed my megaphone, smashed it to the ground. I stood up trying to confront them. I'd never been in a fight in my life. And they just got me in the ribs, punched me in the mouth, threw me to the ground. I tried to get up again, like they just smashed me back down. And then we realized we'd been surrounded on all directions. So, the ultimate police estimate on the day of the number of Chinese nationalists who had come to sort of like attack us, the police estimate was 600 to 700-ish.
Yeah.
So, and this was for a protest that like initially, started out with 10 people on our side. And they started playing the Chinese national anthem on a boom speaker, literally the second that I got attacked. So it was like coordinated. Because we'd been surrounded on all sides, my small crew, we didn't have anywhere to sort of retreat to, or like we couldn't watch our back. So one of these guys in a skeleton teeth mask, this was another guy, another Chinese international student. Well, I don't think that they were students. I think the guys who attacked us were actually like probably sent from the consulate. I think because the consulate, endorsed the violence the next day. But, this guy in a skeleton teeth mask, he came up behind me, punched me in the back of the head while my back was turned, knocked me to the ground, a coward punch. We were, we have a saying in Australia, one punch can kill. Those type of coward punches, when, if someone is knocked out and they collapse to the floor, their head hits the ground, they die,
Yeah, happens.
So it was really dangerous stuff what they were doing, these guys, and they poured yellow liquid that smelled like smelled of phlegm, like that's spat it, like they poured that over us. A security guard who tried to separate us, he was bitten, so I saw a photo of a security guard's hand that had a big bite mark out of it. Just, it was crazy, the violence that happened that day. There were Hong Kongers who were choke slammed to the ground. At least 2 students from mainland China who were on our side, who were like pro-democracy demonstrators alongside us. Within 48 hours, Chinese security police had visited their families and basically threatened them because I guess they were photographed alongside us at the protest. And the Chinese security police basically threatened their families. If your son's seen protesting in Brisbane, Australia, at the University of Queensland again, there'll be consequences. And I went home that day. My parents were apoplectic. They were so angry that I had done this because just like quiet sort of like Greek fruit shop owners really just didn't want me to get involved in activism or politics whatsoever. They were so angry and upset. And basically, I woke up the next day and my accounts had 400, 500 abusive messages all across them, death threats, really vile stuff saying we'll kill your mum, we'll kill you, we'll hire hitmen on the dark web, we'll rape your mum in front of you, we'll torture your mum in front of you, that sort of thing. Really, really vicious stuff. And a lot of racist stuff as well, saying, Australia is the white trash of Asia. That was what they were saying. Calling me a white pig. Other ones were calling me, and this is an interesting one, an insult that sometimes has been used in Australia against, Greek Australians and Italian Australians and stuff is wog. And, there were some even like Chinese accounts that were saying you're a dirty wog and things like that. Like just really crazy, vicious, racist stuff, as well as the death threats. And basically the Chinese Consul General, who the University of Queensland had just that month made an honorary professor. They gave him an honorary doctorate for his services to Chinese literature. It turns out he was just literally state security in China, like probably just persecuting dissidents. Great writer, of course,
Sure.
All his great contributions to Chinese poetry, etc. Zhu Jie, he had actually put out a statement whether it was in his capacity as Consul General or whether it was in his capacity as an honorary professor of the University of Queensland, he had actually endorsed, he had basically endorsed the violence by saying, we endorse the self-motivated patriotic behavior of the Chinese students who opposed the separatists. And Global Times had put my photo up saying, this is the leader of the separatist rally. So he meant me, I suppose. And as we would all know, separatism is death penalty offense in China. Yeah. So, yeah, like this is how it all started, you know. And just with my kind of personality, again, you know, I've never set out whatsoever to be an activist regarding China, but just with my personality, I was like, how dare these guys in Australia try and say that I can't speak out for Uyghurs, Hong Kongers? How dare they try and extend their repression here to a democracy? I'm going to speak up even louder. Fuck these cunts, basically.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I mean, that's just how it all happened, you know. And so I just kept on going. And you know, so I've since been, you know, attacked by, you know, the tankies and the pro CCP people. Sure. They go, oh, Drew was just in it for the fame, blah blah blah. Well, you know, there are easier ways to get fame than go to the Chinese government. You know, sure. You could just make TikToks. You could just go on a nudie run through a stadium. You know,
sure.
Like, it is so much easier to get fame if you just want. If that was your end goal, you can just do that. You know, make funny videos. You don't have to go after the Chinese government, because honestly, those first 6 months were hell. You know, my parents were not speaking to me in the same home. So, you know, I almost lost my entire family relationship because, you know, my parents, they love me so much and they've been so supportive to me since. But that first whole thing, I mean, the start of it, it was such a, you know, they were panicked. They were so worried for me. They wanted me to stop because they were scared for my safety. They were scared for the family's safety. And they were trying to make me stop. And I guess, you know, we just didn't have a relationship for 6 months. And I lost almost my entire friendship group at the same time, because so many people, you know, a lot of them were like, wow, now you're becoming this right-wing anti-China racist and stuff like that. Because, you know, I'm on a uni campus. They're kind of like, you know, uni campus is pretty woke, whatnot. Lost almost my entire friendship circle. It was, you know, it was people who were going, oh, suddenly you're this right-wing racist. But also it was also people who were like, oh, you know, I don't want to be associated because I'm worried about what the university might do to me, what you know, the consequences might be for my career. Lost almost my entire friendship circle, almost lost my family relationship. You know, it was a really lonely, hard 6 months, and I basically couldn't really continue with the part-time work that I'd been doing to support myself through university. So I was just basically tutoring high school kids on the side. And I basically lost that because, like, you know, what parent's going to hire an enemy of the Chinese state to tutor their kid? Yeah, so I lost that. So basically for 6 months, you know, I was completely broke. My family wouldn't talk to me, even though we were under the same roof. I almost lost my entire friendship circle. And then the university started going after me. You know, so like people go, oh, you did it for fame, blah, blah, blah. So many easier ways to go for fame. It was just for me.
I got to tell you, first of all, welcome to the club. Okay. You're now on the shit list of the CCP, and you're on the shit list of the Wu Maos and the Tankies and all of this.
Yo.
We know exactly what you went through because it's happened to us.
Let it be on this day of November that we anoint you.
No, I mean, look, that's why we admire you so much, is because there are very few people that stand up against this kind of abuse, and that's why they do this. It's very effective. They go after the families. They go after you in such a way that it deters anyone from speaking out. And so it's very few people can actually withstand that amount of abuse and mental attacks and so on. And that's just the way they work. And it's disgusting.
Yeah.
That's how they control the narrative about China around the entire world. And as you can see yourself, in Australia, if they do that to you, how many other people have they discouraged before they even got started? You know?
Of course. Like, because in a... You know, and, you know, it continued because, like, after, like, they actually they put out Global Times releases basically calling for the University of Queensland to expel me as a student because
Global Times is
they
Chinese
had-
state media for everyone out there.
Yeah.
yeah, like basically they're frothing at the mouth like nationalist psycho state media. And, you know, they were basically calling for my head, calling for me to be expelled from the university. The university's relationship with China was $300 million a year. Still is. You know, that's $1 billion relationship over a 5-10 year period.
Sure.
And so the university then went after me. So like in the intervening period, I kept on going. I got elected to the University Senate, which runs the university, because the vice chancellor, and the vice chancellor, keep in mind, Peter Hui, he had actually been awarded by the Chinese government in 2015 the most outstanding individual of the year award, by Hanban, the institute that runs the Confucius Institutes.
Right.
They've made him the most outstanding individual of the year. He was on the board of Hanban that ran Confucius Institutes worldwide, and they made him most outstanding individual of the year. And China's vice premier gave him an award at a ceremony in Shanghai or something like that.
Wow.
For his efforts promoting Confucius Institutes worldwide, which we all know are propaganda institutes controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. So it then came out that, you know, at UQ, the Confucius Institutes were teaching, you know, there were 4 courses that they had funded. And these courses asked students whether Hong Kong protesters could be considered terrorists. And they also asked students whether the crackdown on Uyghurs was justified as an anti-terror response. So, for example, we've seen like the PowerPoint slides that they were teaching kids with, and like it was like before talking about, you know, the 1 million who've been rounded up in concentration camps, the torture, the systematic rape that's going on. It was basically like a dot point slide of how many Uyghurs were charged with terror offenses, like you know, the terror attacks that are being carried out by Uyghurs, etc. So basically, just like they were teaching the Chinese government's narrative about these atrocities at an Australian university campus. The University of Queensland is supposed to be one of the top 100 universities in the world. They say that they're one of the best universities in Australia, and this was what they were teaching on campus. And this was what Peter Hui had actually been presiding over. So he wouldn't meet with me. So I was like, okay, I'm running for the University Senate so that he has to meet with me. And I got in, the students elected me as their representative. It was a landslide. And
Great.
Yeah, you know, the greatest we've ever seen. And I sat right across from him at the first University of Queensland Senate meeting of the year, right beside him. Peter Varghese, the Chancellor of the university, who very, very, you know, pro-China. So his brother was the CEO of a company that signed a huge $1 billion deal with a Chinese development company headed by United Front figures. And Peter Varghese, he was also he was previously the head of the Department of Foreign Affairs in Australia before he became the Chancellor of the university. And, you know, wind back 10 years, he'd been a top advisor to John Howard when he said there are WMDs in Iraq, invade Iraq. So, you know, one of the greatest guys of the 21st century, this Peter Varghese.
Sure.
And these are the two that sort of like presided over the entire attempt to expel me, Peter Varghese and Peter Hui. One guy got awarded by the Chinese government, literally had a medallion strung around his neck in Shanghai by China's vice premier for his efforts promoting Chinese propaganda internationally. The other guy, he basically encouraged the Australian Prime Minister at the time to invade Iraq about WMDs, and his brother was the CEO of a company that signed a $1 billion deal with Chinese property development company headed by United Front links. So, you know, these are the two stooges who then presided over the attempt to try and expel me at the university. They spent $500,000 at the very least. So they admitted to the parliament they spent $350,000, something like that, on 3 law firms and 2 PR crisis management firms. And this was only what they admitted to on external funding. So, for example, all the internal university hours that they spent, because they had their own internal lawyers and stuff like that, all up, it probably gets up to $1 million.
It's crazy.
We did a freedom of information request. They had compiled in just 2-3 months, like up to 15,000 pages worth of internal correspondence and research and documents on me at the university. So they put me under like sort of total surveillance. They went through my entire social media history trying to find anything they could use that they could say, oh, that breaches the student charter. So, you know, they go back, they find a fight that I had with another student at the university online. how many times does that happen a day on a campus of 55,000 people? So
Sure.
yeah, UQ 55,000 students. How many times do students get into BIFs with one another online? But they basically compiled this 186-page expulsion document against me. Some of the charges were related to what I had said. I'd posted things like, as a UQ senator, I stand with the people of Hong Kong against the Chinese government. They literally were saying that was destroying the university's reputation. They said I should be expelled because a Chinese international student had written to the university saying, I'm withdrawing from my courses because of what Drew has posted. Have a look. And some of the charges were absolutely ridiculous. Like, for example, they had actually charged me with the offense of theft or whatever because I'd taken a pen off a campus art shop shelf. I'd taken a pen from a campus art shop's shelf, taken a note with the pen and put it back on the shelf and left the store. A $2.50 pen I didn't pay for. And the university was saying, we've got to expel Drew. This is a level 3 most serious offense.
What? We're using a little bit of lead out the pencil.
Yeah, and look. To be fair, it was a felt pen. You know, to be fair.
Okay.
So there was a bit of ink that was used, but basic and you know, the universities, they tried to have this a whole confidential affair. So they put on the top of the document, confidential. You cannot talk about this entire proceeding. They said I couldn't have a lawyer present at the proceedings, and I just thought to myself, what happens if I just talk about it? So I just went public, completely huge public campaign, and then pretty soon it spiraled out of control for UQ. They had to let me. They were saying, "Oh, you can't have a lawyer present at the proceedings. You can have one support person." And then one of Australia's top lawyers came in and he said, "I'll represent you for free, Tony Morris."
Nice.
He was the youngest person appointed a silk in the 20th century in the Commonwealth. So like silks are like the most, you know, the most senior lawyers or whatever. He was actually like 32 when they appointed him a silk, and he was a silk for longer than I've been alive. And Tony Morris came in and he said, "I'll help you for free." And because when I met with him, I was like, "Are you sure you're going to help me for free? Because I can't afford it." Like we met and I told him my story and he was like, "Yep, we're going to help you." And I was like, "Oh, cool, awesome, Tony." And I was like, "But, you know, I don't have any money." And then it was like, "Oh, yeah, don't worry. Like, you know, that's why I do this stuff. Like I take from the rich and then I help ordinary people." So
that's awesome.
So yeah, it was like, it's a Robin Hood type affair. So he came in and then we were like to the university. So my support person is just going to be Tony Morris QC, like one of Australia's best lawyers. You know, it's not going to be my mate down the shops. The support person's going to be a top lawyer. And then they pissed themselves and, you know, it became this huge thing. Members of parliament started speaking up for me. But then equally, there were a lot who just like tried to ignore me. Like I wrote to say the foreign ministry spokesperson of the Labor Party, because not a single Labor Party MP in the state of Queensland would support me. My local MP wouldn't support me. I wrote to my local state MP, wouldn't support me. And they often they'd go, "Oh, well, you have to talk to our party's foreign ministry spokesperson." I wrote to them, "No, sorry, we don't involve ourselves in internal university disciplinary matters, blah, blah, blah." So a lot of people did try and basically ignore me. A lot of people wouldn't help me. I just was really lucky that I had Tony Morris. I had a couple MPs who really did back me. It became this huge thing in Australia, I suppose, and it even made New York Times, Wall Street Journal, LA Times, the BBC. Like, it actually became international news because it was so brazen what the university was doing. Like they were trying to say that their official position that they were trying to put to the public was, "Oh, well, it's got nothing to do with China. We're expelling Drew because he took the pen off the shelf." And like, not a single person, you know, with any brains could ever believe that I was getting expelled from the University of Queensland and they're spending $500,000 on these top law firms. They're spending money on PR crisis management firms because some guy took a pen off the shelf and stole 20 cents worth of ink by putting it back on the shelf and not. It was crazy. It was crazy. And so they tried, but still, it was like they had a death drive, you know, and it didn't make any sense unless you considered, you know, well, they're just doing this because the Chinese Communist Party is telling them to do it.
Yeah.
Because rationally, it made absolutely no sense. No. Like, because by going after me, they smashed their reputation in Australia. Like, there were like there were people who were running campaigns, and they were saying like, you know, there was like a big movement, I guess, among like, say, you know, people who had graduated from UQ in the past, alumni. They were like, we're never donating to UQ again based on this. And like there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people who contacted the university, wrote to the university. Literally, a former Prime Minister of Australia intervened. He like literally put out a statement saying the university and Peter Varghese are bowing the knee to China. And this was Kevin Rudd, who's not really known as a big sort of like anti-CCP person. You know, Kevin Rudd, he was putting out a statement saying the university is bending their knee to China. It was like it was New York Times. Like ordinarily, a university in Australia would kill someone to get in the New York Times, and they were getting in the New York Times, but it wasn't positive press. You know,
no.
It was this university in Australia is trying to expel a student who's been a vocal critic of their relationship with China, and no one believes that the case against him is not politically motivated. So it became this huge thing. And again, people were like, oh, you're doing it for the fame. Well, man, it was a huge mental toll on me, though. Yeah. I had fun. I had fun just like really going after them, because my whole personality, every time someone tries to bully me, like I want to speak up louder. Sure. And so like I had fun in the sense that like I was so glad that like I didn't give in and I could go up against these people, even though it was like, you know, against all the odds, like these people had to be exposed. I was really happy I could try and actually campaign with that. But ultimately, though, it did have a huge mental toll. Like, I remember when I first got that 186-page expulsion document in the email, and at the top it said confidential. Like, if you talk about this, you know, there will be consequences. Like, at that point, I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I thought my life was over, you know? At that point, I wasn't even thinking, oh, I'm going to go public. Like, I just thought, oh my God, my life's over. Because it's 186 pages you go through, and it's just like, it's just the worst stuff they could ever, like, put together, like the pen. Oh, Drew called someone a cunt. Oh, Drew, look at this screenshot. Look at this screenshot of Drew swearing. Like it was really vicious what they did. Like I lost a friend to suicide. Literally 3 months before. So like, you know, UQ, they knew I'd struggled with the death threats. They knew that I'd struggled with the whole attacks on my family, and they knew as well that like just like 2-3 months before, a fellow UQ student, a friend of mine, had actually died in a suicide that was really huge public news in Australia because it was like tied to a protest. And look, like the university, like he tragically lost his life in January, and within a couple of days there had been trolls who had been attacking me about his death, saying basically they were
Were they blaming you? Were they trying to tie you to his death?
Blaming me and mocking me over the death, and basically like it was some of the most vicious stuff you could ever imagine, right?
Oh, dude, this happens to us all the time. We understand what you're going through. They use tragedies like that, and they try to do this guilt by association. It's another way of them trying to dissuade you from speaking out. So they try to make you feel as if you're responsible for some kind of tragedy, in order to try and shut you up. It's just one of the many tactics they use.
Yeah, it was just really vicious. Like I've been dealing with vicious attacks and like abuse for like 2.5 years now, you know, and that was some of the most vicious and brutal I'd received. And I had responded as, you know, any tough-minded young person would respond to, in a way like I think anyone would respond the same way I did if it's a couple days after their mate's tragic suicide and they're in a very dark place and people are trying to actually abuse them for it. I just said, eat glass, you cunts, to the people that did. And what did the university do? They screenshotted me saying that, removed the context of people trying to basically yeah, like this is the most vicious stuff ever, you know?
Yeah.
And I just was sitting there at the computer. I looked at the 186-page document. I saw that they had even used my response to people trolling me about my mate's suicide. They'd even tried to use that against me. Like they could see the immediate preceding comments were actually mocking me about a mate's suicide and attacking me. And they ignored that. And then they just said, in a vacuum, Drew has just come out of nowhere and said, eat glass, and told these students and they was trying to say that was a suicide. They were trying to say that I had incited suicides and stuff like that by saying that. So like it was such a vicious thing. I looked at this expulsion document. I was like, oh my God, my life's over. So at that point, you know, I was glad that I could campaign against the university. I was glad it became a big public thing. But initially, like, it was just such a hard thing.
Well, you went through the hardest part. You know, that specific time that you've pinpointed there. I mean, I had something very similar happen to me when I was 21 years old. But I know what it's like when all the wind is taken out of your sails and you feel like, you know, it's a hopeless situation. The thing is, you got over that, okay? You fought the hardest part of all of this. You got over it, and so now there's nothing in the world that's going to stop you. You know?
Exactly, man. Exactly. That's my entire mindset, because I'm like, they even had. So, for example, like, as well, when the expulsion document came out, and it was 186 pages, and I sent this to the, you know, ABC, the Australian public broadcaster. I sent it to like New York Times, Washington Post, like all the top papers in Australia. All the journalists read it and they were like, yes, this is a politically motivated farce. But at that stage, I couldn't publicly release the entire 186-page thing, right? Because there were names in it and stuff like that. Then the university, if I'd done that, the university would have gone after me harder, going, wow, look, Drew's now trying to name other students. And so, you know, I couldn't release it publicly. So there were like people in like the student wings of the major parties in Australia who were going to like local MPs and stuff, saying the reason Drew's not releasing the whole document is because there's rape allegations in it and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, of course they'd say that.
Yeah, so like, and they just hated me from student politics or whatever. So like, this is the level of vicious stuff I was receiving. Like I had death threats to my family, people saying they're going to rape and kill my mum. I had people trying to do fake rape allegations against me. Like, I had people, basically mocking me over a friend's suicide, and like the most vicious stuff ever. It's been 2.5 years almost of hell, but it's like now I've gotten through to the other side. It's like I've weathered just fucking hell basically, and I've never. They try to go, oh, he's done it for money, he's done it for fame. Like, no, I've actually just weathered hell, and I've like never profited really. I've never made any money from this. Like, I posted the other day, like I've got $20 in my personal account, like. Like, I just did this because I believe in the cause. I believe I want to support, like, I believe my Uyghur friends, I want to support them. I want to support Hong Kongers. I want to support Tibetans. I've seen my Uyghur friends be targeted for even being associated with me. Like, earlier this year, my emails were hacked by a Chinese IP address. And I had a transcript of an interview I'd done with my Uyghur friend in Australia. And like, he had talked about intimidation he had received from the CCP and how they'd abused his family back home. And like, we worked out, you know, there was a certain date in January that they had gotten into my account. It was like early January. And like a couple days after that, my Uyghur friend's mother back home had been taken to the concentration camps. And she'd been harassed for many months, but it was kind of an unprecedented move. And he didn't know why. And it was just like, and we worked out, you know, my emails had been hacked a couple of days before, and they had that, and the transcript of that interview was in my emails. Like, we think they probably took his mum for that. Like it's just hell, you know. It's just hell. They've taken family members of my friends.
It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. Now, we need to move on from this. We need to move on to something different here. Firstly, though, I just want to get your opinion on something. Now, for the longest time, we've been talking about how Australia more or less belongs to China. Okay, that's something that's been a recurring thing that I've been talking about. I mean, we see the Chinese flag being raised above the Box Hill, you know, police station. We see the fact that you've got a United Front member as part of your parliament there. You know, all these dodgy business deals, everyone's being bought out by China. The fact that people like you are being attacked and censored by the Chinese consulate within China, you know. What is your take on all of this stuff?
Oh, look, they're like the United Front are so active in Australia, and just basically through financial ties and through sheer brutal intimidation, thuggery and stuff like that against people who want to speak up. Like, they have succeeded in making a lot of Australian politicians, you know, completely shit scared of ever opposing the Chinese Communist Party, speaking up against the atrocities that occur. So many, like they've managed to buy up huge institutions in Australian society, like the university sector, like basically just through like the huge financial ties that have formed through like, you know, international students. They've used international students as a cash cow. Like, and I feel so terrible for these students themselves because they're often just exploited. Like, huge, they're made to pay extortionate rates at the universities, and then they're like, and they oftentimes live in pretty tough conditions. Like, for example, when the COVID pandemic came around, like we tried to do a hamper drive for, you know, international students and stuff like that, because the university was trying to trumpet how charitable they were by offering $25 hampers to international students who were going hungry, and we're like, okay, we're going to do it for free. So we delivered 250 free hampers to like international students. Many of them were Chinese international students, people who were like going hungry because they couldn't work in Australia and they weren't you can't work if you're an international student really, and also you can't really access welfare, and you know things were really tough when that pandemic came around. We were actually, you know, contrary to the Chinese government, which continues to say Drew's this white supremacist racist, I was getting, you know, like hampers sent out to Chinese international students who were going hungry during the pandemic. So like they're really exploited a lot of the times. The universities use them as a cash cow, and the universities have just basically been completely bought up by the Chinese Communist Party, because for the University of Queensland, it's $300 million a year. University of Sydney, University of Melbourne, like, you know, those three are supposed to be the best in Australia. University of Sydney, University of Melbourne, it's even more, like it's $500 million a year. So, you know, you think about this in terms of 10 years or more, over a decade, their ties to the Chinese Communist Party, like their ties to China, which completely rely upon their ties to the Chinese Communist Party, they're worth billions. Yeah. And the university vice chancellors, they get their they get huge salaries, $1.5 million, a lot of them, like more than the presidents of Harvard, more than the president, you know, more than the vice chancellor or the senior provost at Oxford University, etc. Like they're paid more than the Australian Prime Minister. And the vice chancellors, a lot of the time they have in their contracts key performance indicators. They have to deepen ties with China. So, for example, when I was on the University of Queensland Senate, I was able to reveal to people that they had given him a $200,000 bonus for meeting that KPI, deepening ties with China. And they had listed, he'd visited China 4 times in 2018, blah, blah, blah. Like, look at how he's deepening ties with China. He got a $200,000 bonus. And that was confidential. That was confidential. Like, I sent that to an MP who revealed it on the floor of Parliament under parliamentary privilege. And so the university couldn't go after me because it was used with parliamentary privilege.
Yeah.
And if they had gone after me, it would have been contempt of Parliament. But like they wanted that to be secret. They didn't want the public to know that they were going to give a $200,000 bonus to the vice chancellor, who had earlier been awarded by the Chinese government for propaganda efforts. They were going to give him a $200,000 bonus for deepening ties with China. So the universities have been really bought off. Massive sections of the major parties, both Labor and the Liberals, have been bought off. Like Gladys Liu, as you know, she's raised millions of dollars for the Liberal Party, and this is the Liberal Conservative government of Australia. They like to talk really tough on China, and yet Gladys Liu, in an interview, on Sky News, she couldn't call Xi Jinping a dictator. She said, "Well, no, that's in their system. He's an elected chairman." She wouldn't condemn atrocities, you know. And she was under investigation by ASIO, Australia's intelligence service, prior to entering Parliament. She was photographed with a guy who later ended up dead in a Melbourne hotel room after he revealed that a Chinese businessman had offered him $1 million to be elected to like get into Parliament and basically be like a CCP agent. So this Chinese guy, he comes out and he says, I was offered $1 million by a massive Chinese businessman to run for Parliament, get elected. And then he turns up dead in a Melbourne hotel room under suspicious circumstances. And then there's Gladys Liu just like, you know, having dinner with him, just smiling like, wow, so normal, you know.
There's something very important that I need to just say here. You know, before you came along, I'll be honest, I thought that Australians were a bunch of sissies, basically, completely weak and just, you know, could not stand up against the CCP, because for years now I've been seeing, well, not only Australia, but Canada too, basically be taken over in plain sight by the Chinese government in so many ways, just being steamrolled. And everyone's just like, standing back and letting it happen. A lot of people are unhappy about it, but nothing's being said. That's why he's such a breath of fresh air. But here's the thing. Evidently you support the people of Hong Kong. You support Tibetans, Uyghurs. You support, I presume you support the people of Taiwan as well.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the thing. You know the people of Hong Kong, they're Chinese, right? And you know the people in Taiwan, they're Chinese too, right? So this whole label of being called a racist is really boggling, because if you were truly a racist, you would hate the people of Hong Kong and the people of Taiwan and the Uyghurs and Uyghurs are ethnically not Chinese, but they're you know what I mean? Yeah. So this idea, it's something that we face a lot as well. It's the Chinese Communist Party's trick is they've tried to kind of trick the world into believing that the Chinese government, the country of China, and the Chinese people are one and the same thing. So that if you criticize the Chinese government, suddenly you're racist towards Chinese people. But of course, this isn't the case, because if that was the case, you would hate the people of Hong Kong and Taiwan and everything else. So that's always a crazy argument that they try to throw out there to label us racist. Yeah.
And I've been banging on for more than a year now. Like, I really want to support urgent humanitarian, basically airlift programs, like trying to get Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, Tibetans, people and Chinese who are getting persecuted by the CCP. Like, I want to bring in as many of them as possible to Australia, provide them safe haven and stuff like that. So, if I was this evil racist, why would I be supporting, trying to get as many Uyghurs as possible who are facing genocide? I just genuinely want to try and support, this as I'm trying to support these humanitarian causes, because I believe that all human beings are, created equal, and all human life has value and should be protected. Nevertheless though, I'm branded, he's a white supremacist, he's a racist, he's far right, he's a Nazi, he's Trump. Even though I don't even like Trump,
don't worry. It's the cheapest, lowest tactic that they can use, and it's fairly effective. In today's woke culture, if you label someone a racist, immediately people are like, "Oh wow, better be careful." Yeah. It's kind of ridiculous without even seeing any proof of you being a racist, which you obviously aren't. But C-Milk has some questions about your.
Well, before we get into the campaign, I wanted to ask you something more positive, since this has been the most doom and gloom shit I've ever heard in my entire life. That being said, I want to say
I've heard worse.
No, I do commend you on your bravery, and that's fantastic stuff. I do wanted to ask you though, how does it feel? You're 22, right?
Yeah.
How does it feel as a 22-year-old to absolutely fuck shit up? Because these people that are in positions of power that are just glaring over the populace like they can do whatever the hell they want. How does it feel to absolutely fuck up their plans?
Oh, it's awesome, man. It is so cool, because the university, they just thought I was a bug to be squashed. And then suddenly they were having to have crisis meetings and stuff like that. I remember the first time I met Peter Varghese, he just was smirking at me the entire time we had our meeting, and he was just talking down to me like I was a kid. I remember Peter Hoy, the vice chancellor of the university, every time he'd talk to me, he'd smirk. He called me a boy. So later when I was walking home that night I was walking out of the UQ Senate meeting, at the first UQ Senate meeting, and they'd spent 3 hours trying to discuss whether I would ever whether they'd refuse to let me get seated on the UQ Senate. I was walking home, and he got into, his deluxe, I think it was his beautiful Audi or whatever it was, this beautiful luxury car. And he winds down his window, and was like, "See you boys," because I was walking with another student, and at the same meeting, he was sitting next to me, and I was talking about why I was really opposed to the Confucius Institute and stuff like that. And then he was like, "Oh, well done on he's got a Scandinavian accent. He's like, "Well done on your activism, Drew. We just approved the Confucius Institute for 5 more years." And then everyone just laughed, and everyone was everyone at the UQ Senate meeting was laughing at me to my face. And it's a corporate board of CEOs and judges and top legal figures, and just it was just stacked out with pro-establishment types, and they all just were look at this little pipsqueak kid. And I think they just thought I would fucking crack, because I went to that UQ Senate meeting where even before they tried to expel me, they had tried to intimidate me on the UQ Senate. So they brought in their top legal firm to threaten me with bankruptcy, and then eventually they even threatened me with contempt of court proceedings, because I had actually I tried to release documents that were crucial to my defense, and the university said, that's contempt of court. We'll prosecute you. We'll seek a 3-year prison sentence. So they were threatening me with even jail time. And I think they just thought that I would crack because I was this young guy and stuff like that. And like, oh, what does he know? But like, man, I held my own against them. You know, I was running rings around Peter Hoy and Peter Varghese at these Senate meetings, and it really pissed them off because they're really egotistical guys who like to think they're the smartest people in the universe, and yet with all their smarts, with all their beautiful PhDs, blah blah, like they couldn't just see that it was immoral to do business with a regime carrying out genocide as we speak.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was pretty fucking cool. Just basically, really, really, like, just making fools of people who are just these establishment shills. They think they're the smartest people in the universe. They thought that I was this upstart pipsqueak kid that could just be cracked and brutalized and just squashed like a bug. And I just like really, really, really fuck shit out against them.
Yeah, tell us about so you did all this stuff. You suffered the storm. You weathered the storm. What are you doing now?
Yeah, what am I doing now? So, so they got, in the end, I got suspended for 6 months. They were seeking a life sentence on me, you know, and we got it down to 6 months. But I just kept on going with my protests, kept on going with my organizing and everything. And now we're running our own party. So to start your own political party in Australia, it's a really tough process. So originally, a couple months ago, you only needed 500 members to form your own party. And then all of a sudden the government, like, I don't know, we got to 500 members, and then the government puts out a statement saying it's got to be 1,500 members. So we go out, we try to get to 1,500 members. We get there. But then you have to go through your membership list line by line to make sure every single person is registered as an Australian voter. So you have to go to the Australian... So the major parties, they get access to the electoral data. They get access to the electoral roll just by virtue of being an established party. But if you're someone like me who's trying to start their own, you have to go to the Australian Electoral Commission offices. You have to sit there at their little like shitty computer in this dingy office. And you just have to sit there 9 to 5 the entire opening hours of the office and just go through line by line data entry. So just type in one of your member names, find them on the electoral roll. Oh yeah, they're not a voter. Oh yeah, they are a voter. Just imagine that, like 50 hours worth of that. And that was what I was doing for like months. It was this long process to try to set up our own party. But now we've got 2,050 members nationwide.
Great.
You know, and there are political parties in Australia who have MPs in Parliament who have less members than us now. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. So like, yeah, there are political parties that are represented in Parliament that have less than 2,000 members. So we've got 2,000 members nationwide. We were just featured on 60 Minutes in Australia, which was an awesome sort of launch point, and we had hundreds of messages of support pour in, people wanting to volunteer. You know, it's awesome because so many people were saying, no, like, there's no chance to you forming your own party. There's no chance for you running. Like, just give up. It's impossible. And like, it was a slog to get that party, like to create the party. It was a slog. And now the foundation stones are set, and we're basically, it's like a Milk Tea Alliance movement. You know, we've got my friend Max Mock, who's an Australian citizen. He went back to Hong Kong to be on the front lines of the protest movement because he felt so strongly about opposing the CCP. And Max was on the front lines of the movement in Hong Kong, and he has come back to Australia because he had friends who were part of the first round of purges with the national security legislation, and his parents were threatening to turn him into the CCP, and because they were pro-CCP. And, you know, he's really been on the front lines. Like, he's given up everything. Like, he lost his entire family. He lost that home he had in Hong Kong. He's come back to Australia. And in Melbourne, Australia, like, you know, he's been struggling. Like, he's just been working, like, odd jobs here and there, construction sites. He's been away. He's been like a waiter at Chinese restaurants. He was eating at soup kitchens for 3-4 months last year because he didn't have any money at all. His family cut him off, and it's really hard to get. Like, it was really hard to get money. You know, when Melbourne was in huge lockdown with pandemic.
Yeah.
So this guy, you know, very humble guy, and he's been on the front lines of the movement for democracy against the CCP, and he's now running against Gladys Liu in Melbourne, that United Front member who raised millions of dollars for the Liberal Party through her United Front links. You cannot draw a greater distinction. She's actually a Hong Konger herself. She's a Hong Konger herself, and she's so a part of the establishment. She couldn't call Xi Jinping a dictator. She wouldn't speak out for people in Hong Kong when the protest movement was happening. And this guy who basically like fled Hong Kong because he was going to get rounded up by the CCP, and he's come back to Melbourne, like, you know, and he's a proud Australian, and he was just basically eating at soup kitchens and stuff like that because his family cut him off. Like, he's going up against Gladys Liu. He's running for the party, Max Mock against Gladys Liu. And then we've got, and I'm so proud of this, we've got, 2 young Uyghur women running in South Australia. So, Max is 20 years old, I'm 22. Our Uyghur candidates are, Adila is our lead Senate candidate in South Australia. She's 20 years old, and she's the youngest Muslim woman to ever run for parliament. So people go, Drew's a white supremacist. Our candidate is the youngest Muslim woman to run for parliament in Australian history.
Yeah.
And she's the first, and alongside our other Uyghur candidate, Inti Elham, who's 27, they're the first Uyghurs to run for election in the West, in a democratic election anywhere, as far as we know. So, we're trying to give voice to these, members of these communities that, the parties in Australia, they don't want to fucking know them. They don't want to. Still, Australia refuses to say that the Uyghur genocide is a genocide. Like Canada, the US, Europe, there's been big moves to try and, respond to this genocide, and still the Australian government won't call it that. And we still don't have Magnitsky Act legislation. So we can't sanction individual officials who are responsible for the genocide. So think about, say, the top secretary for the CCP in Xinjiang. He could technically just come to Australia. Like, he could have assets in Australia. He could have an Australian bank account. He could store wealth here. And no.
Yeah, you can't go to the US.
Yeah. But Australia, he can store all the wealth he wants here. And so the major parties don't want to push forward that Magnitsky Act legislation, because a lot of those Chinese billionaire donors of theirs, they'd be fucking hit, because they're all CCP type.
Yeah, seriously, Drew, you're the change Australia needs.
Thank you.
I just got to say that any of our viewers out there who are Australian, please consider voting for Drew and joining his party, because
thank you, man.
It's been just too long. The CCP's been taking advantage of Australia and other countries for too long, and this is your chance to fight back. Yeah. Before you just become a province of China, really.
I think it also goes past us. Like, this is not targeted only at Australian viewers. I think this goes well beyond that, because what this is pure inspiration.
Thank you.
To finally understand how, I think Drew's story may have touched you guys to understand enough about the absolute prolific nature of CCP influence in other countries, and how it quite literally is the most important issue today.
Yeah, I mean the fact that they co-opt the international students, because they're very firmly under the control of the CCP through propaganda, through their upbringing, through their education, through intimidation of family and so on. They can co-opt the international students. They can co-opt the embassies, etc., overseas, to do the bidding of the CCP, to throw their censorship overseas, to change the narratives in universities, in society, in government, politics around the world. And the rest of the world is just too naive, and they haven't really caught on to that. So your story is a fantastic way to break it open so people can see what's going on.
Too simple, maybe naive.
Yeah, Drew, why don't you wrap it up here for us and give us some final messages? I actually want you to, if you can, tell the average people out there what they can actually do, instead of posting on Twitter, fuck the CCP. Yeah. What can they actually go do out there to combat this?
I was just going to quickly say, man, I got goosebumps when you mentioned the international students, because and this has really affected me. There have been multiple times where Chinese international students have actually approached me on campus, and it wasn't I wasn't getting attacked that time. These guys came up to me and they were like, I know about Tiananmen. I really support your cause, the pro-democracy cause. I support the people in Hong Kong, but I can't even be seen, standing next to you on campus, because there are people who watch us, and the other Chinese international students, the Chinese Student Scholar Associations that are run by the consulates, they basically monitor the students politically, and they couldn't be seen talking to me, So that stuff does happen. Exactly what you said, man. You have to do more than just post to Twitter, fuck the CCP, or Winnie the Pooh. It has to be I think people really need to get organized and really try and put pressure on politicians. What are you going to be doing about this genocide?
Right.
What are you going to be doing to sanction individual Chinese officials who are responsible for the genocide? Are you just going to allow them to continue to stash wealth in our countries? People really need to put pressure on these politicians so that they can't just get away with this anymore. They can't just turn they just can't turn a blind eye. Really need to get organized. If you're overseas, create associations, create groups that are dedicated to trying to boycott the Chinese government's genocidal events. like really put pressure on things like for example, corporate sponsors of the Beijing Olympics, or like Western companies that are doing business in Xinjiang, like for example, like even like say Volkswagen, these companies that literally have factories and they could be using Uyghur forced labor, really put pressure on those corporations. Like it has to be there has to be a big mobilization in society. It really has to be something that is, it has to be something
There's no
that, you know, is that encompasses Hong Kongers, Tibetans, Hong Kongers, and ordinary Chinese who are opposed to the CCP, like that milk and Taiwanese as well, like, you know, milk tea alliance type stuff, because it's really, really important that, you know, ordinary Chinese are not attacked and not, you know, driven into the arms of the CCP through racism and stuff like that. Like, we have to work together with these communities. That's one thing that, like, I'm really happy about our political party that we're building up here in Australia, because, like, we're working directly with these types of communities that are like being persecuted. Like, we've got Uyghur candidates, we've got Tibetans and Hong Kongers. We're going to announce our Tibetan candidate soon. So like, that's one thing I'd really encourage. Like, people, like when you form these groups and get organized and get mobilized, like link up with these local communities, like Uyghur activists in your country, Hong Kongers, Tibetan activists in your country, Chinese pro-democracy activists in this country. It's so important to just like, it's like, I honestly think there's like a global milk tea alliance movement that is sort of starting to spring up. And like,
nice.
And like you see it in Taiwan, there was the sunflower movement. You see the young people fighting in Hong Kong, like Students for a Free Tibet in Canada, Europe, and America. They've been amazing right now. Like, they've got these amazing Hong Konger and Tibetan young activists associated with them, and they just were in Greece recently, where they were disrupting like the
Olympic ceremony.
Yeah, that was really good.
Like stuff like that is amazing. So like you know, groups like that, like Students for a Free Tibet, I cannot speak more highly of them. Like try link up with people like that. Try organize with these activists, with these communities that are being directly persecuted. Because honestly, I think the long-term vision of, like, you know, Westerners, like people working together across these national divides, across these cultural divides, like whether you're European, Canadian, American, whether you're Tibetan, you're a Uyghur, you're Hong Konger, you're Chinese, you're Taiwanese, like building up this big, broad, multicultural coalition, opposing the Chinese Communist Party, calling for like putting pressure on corporations that have these blood money ties to the Chinese Communist Party, trying to put pressure on pension funds to divest. I know in Britain, Benedict Rogers and Hong Kong Watch have been really, really powerful, trying to pressure huge British pension funds to divest from China due to the genocide that's going on. We're going to try do that. With our political party, we're going to try and push for the huge super funds in Australia that are where they're invested in China. We want that divestment to occur. Honestly, I actually think that broader strategy, you know, boycott the Chinese economy, divest from Chinese companies, and sanction individual Chinese leaders, and work across these cultural divides, bringing together all the different communities that are getting persecuted. You know, Mongolians, Turkish people who are fighting Erdogan as well. Like, you know, Enes Kanter, he's doing amazing work now speaking out for Uyghurs. Like we need this broad global anti-authoritarian pro-democracy movement.
Yeah.
That's the goal, you know?
Yeah.
And you know,
thank you for saying that.
And it's really as well a story about fighting corruption, and also even fighting like the corporate oligarchs as well, because like these people, all they care about is blood money, and they've actually assisted the Chinese Communist Party in their atrocities. And so it's a broad.
Yes.
So my vision for the long-term future is this broad, decentralized, pro-democracy movement where we're fighting authoritarian dictators everywhere. We're also fighting for civil liberties and democracy at home where they're at risk. So like, for example, in Australia, we've seen big rollbacks of civil liberties and, you know, increasing surveillance and stuff like that. We want to fight against that too. Like, it has to be a broad movement to reinvigorate democracy, I think, and it has to encompass all these different communities. And that's the vision, you know, bringing together, forming alliances across the divide. And honestly, that's something the CCP really fears. That's why
That's absolutely the coolest message I've ever heard from a political party. So I would, if I was Australian, I would definitely put my name behind you.
100%, man. 100%.
Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you so much for having me on. I love to be on.
Yeah, we probably will have you on again in the future to weigh in on some issues. You're a very inspirational man.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're incredibly happy that you came on, and I'm sure our viewers agree that you're a very interesting person. You're starting very important discussions, and don't stop what you're doing, mate. Yeah. And if you ever again feel like things are too overwhelming and you've reached that point where it just seems like it's too much to handle, don't worry. You've got people on your side. You always will, and you can always count on us for support no matter what.
Honestly, we've gotten through the worst of it, and we've weathered the storm already. There's nothing more they can throw at us.
No.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. So just keep going. Strength.
Fear nothing.
Yeah, from strength to strength. Onwards and upwards, mate. And we wish you the best of luck with your campaign. We're going to help as much as we can.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.